to this episode of Shonen Flop, where we talk about manga series and Shonen Jump that didn't make it big. I'm David.
I'm Jordan.
This week, we're talking about Monster Tamer Girls, and we are joined by our guest today, Zander Cannon. Zander, thank you so much for being on the show, and I hope I just didn't say your name wrong, and that's why there's like a long silence.
Probably the coolest name of anyone we've had on the show so far, by the way.
I had to like double check that was your real name and not like the screen name that Jordan sent me.
It's real, like, my name's Alexander, but I couldn't pronounce it when I was little, so that's what they called me. So it's funny because it's like it goes in waves. Like, all of a sudden there's like, you know, there's the character on Buffy, and people are like, oh yeah, like Buffy. And I'm like, yeah, sure, sort of, you know? And now it's like, I'll meet a ton of Xanders, but they're all like 11.
Xander on Buffy was very influential to a lot of people growing up to a certain, a certain stage in life.
Zander, do you mind giving the audience a little bit of spiel about who you are?
I'm Zander Cannon. I'm a comic book artist. I've been doing comics for 28 years now.
Hell yeah.
The thing I'm best known for is either a tie, I think, between Top 10, which I did with Alan Moore and Gene Ha, and Kaiju Max, which is my current comic, which is about a prison for giant monsters. Hence the choice of the manga this week.
I have read season 1 of Kaiju Max, and I really liked it a lot.
Yeah, that's like the grimmest season. It gets a little bit easier to take after that.
It was pretty grim.
It was a little tropey, shall we say.
I loved it, so hey.
I stand by it, but it also, like, I try to be easier on characters after that.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've worked with Alan Moore, I've worked with Mark Waid, I've worked with Bill Willingham, I've worked for Marvel and DC and Dark Horse and Oni Press and, you know, basically everybody. I'm more known as an indie writer-artist.
Yeah, you're, like, legit.
Yeah, that's what I tell myself in the mirror every day to psych myself up.
You should.
I'm strong. I'm beautiful. I have a Wikipedia page. What more could I need?
Right.
I was telling you earlier, I have a manager at work, and I mentioned to him, yeah, I'm gonna record an episode of my podcast with this comic book artist named Zander Cannon, and he was like, oh my god, I love Zander Cannon.
I probably know him too then.
I was telling my friend who is he's a best-selling novel or a best-selling author in the New York Times who was also my high school lit teacher, and he was a really big fan of your work too. I remember actually me and my friend Dan Harrison, who was also a guest on the show, if you remember him, Jordan.
Of course I do.
We actually sat down and, you know, he read comics since the 80s, and he literally just sat down for like an hour and pointed out every single reference in Top 10 to us, and that was super cool.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I'll have to tell him that you were on the show. I'm sure he'd be very excited to hear about it.
That's awesome.
Top 10 is great, yeah.
I think that it was pretty revolutionary for comics at the time, taking hints from TV to tell a team book story, to tell like an X-Men type story. But for me, it was a revelation in terms of like, this is how comics can be written in a sort of more casual, sort of more dialogue-y way that doesn't have to be, you know, setting up the next big punch or something like that. And that people will read a book like that. I think that it being written by Alan Moore does a lot of the work, but but that people will read a comic in that style instead of it having to kind of hew to what was popular at the time, you know, in the late 90s, which was the over the crest of the Image stuff, but that was still kind of going strong.
Was that still in the age of Liefeld?
Yeah, kind of. But I mean, the shine was off it a little bit.
I feel like Kaiju Max is almost like the reverse of Top 10, you know? Like where like Top 10 is like a show about cops through superheroes, and then Kaiju Max is a show about prisoners through monsters.
Yeah, it's interesting, too. People kind of are like, you know, when we talk about adapting it, and people are like, oh, we can tell the story of, like, the prison guards and, you know, like, and have it from their perspective. I'm like, that's every monster movie. Like, why would it be different? And that is kind of the problem, that, like, people are like, they want their own Godzilla versus Kong or whatever. So,
of course, yeah.
Yeah, the moment will come.
Eventually, yeah.
Because I know this recording could be 3 hours long, so I'm going to try and be Mr. Watching the Clock. One last thing I want to note just before we transition to manga details is also, we found out about you via the book Heck, which was part of our book club. So just, if I can't say it enough, Luke, thank you so much for being an awesome part of the Discord, running our book club, and of course, putting us in touch with Zander. And worry not, we will definitely be giving a shout out to your project at the end of this show, because it's the least I can do for a great guy like yourself.
Hell yeah, Luke.
Luke was on our Mora King episode, which is actually one of the most interesting series we ever read. read. So if you ever have a chance to listen to our episodes, Zander, I think that one is one you might appreciate checking out.
That'd be great.
Speaking of manga, let's get into the manga details. This series was created by Shimazaki Mujirushi.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan was not ready for me to say that right, I could tell.
You got it. I was paying attention to the order of the vowels, and you got it.
Thank you. Yes, I said every vowel in that word. It's the least I could do for this author.
You should be proud.
Zander, I am very bad at pronouncing things. There's actually one of our patrons I gave up saying his Patreon name, so I have to shorten it because I just can't say it. so I say T. Wolfwood because I am very inconsistent of being able to say Trafalgar. And you know he was fucking like that. He's talking about me.
Oh yeah,
I love that guy. He's like our oracle where he'll send us like recording notes when we do recordings in the Discord. But anyway, so this guy contributed to a very long Japanese word that I'm not going to try saying, anthology comic Kai, and he also created Hukoku College Note, which was 31 chapters, and Nino wa Papa wo Anetsu Shita webcomic that is actually still going on. So it's nice to know he is still making a comic. Jordan, what's the best way to talk about the last author we talked about?
You mean the guy who did Bokusan?
Yeah, so this dude, he gave up making manga and now he just either draws porn or he VTubes Minecraft. So It's nice to see that this guy is still doing not that there's anything wrong with that. It was just kind of very strange to go from children's comic book artist to making pornography and VTubing.
You know what? It's not that weird in the specific realm of manga and anime.
That's fair.
This guy, he is still chasing the dream.
I'll have to check out his webcomic and see.
Yeah.
He's like 5 or 6 other projects. He's probably, by terms of volume, done the most projects we've ever covered in Shonen.
Wow. Because
usually someone either gives up or they get like a big success. So like, for instance, are you familiar with My Hero Academia?
Oh, sure, of course.
You're like, they stole my idea.
Right.
My Hero Academia has been doing that for the last like 8 years, but he had 2 series that just were not very strong before that.
Even people who seem like overnight successes have a bunch of like sort of under the radar things that, you know, they fell on their face or whatever.
Does Alan Moore have any of those? Because I'm not familiar with those.
All the stuff that he was doing for 2000 AD was certainly a lot less sort of polished than what...
It's Alan Moore, yeah.
When he did V for Vendetta, like, he lucked out into having like an extraordinary, you know, collaborator who really elevated that work, especially early on.
Oh, yeah.
Jordan's like, hey, have we talked about Alan Moore enough in this show when we have someone else on it? So you're just going to be like, do you want me to like see if he's free and he'll like tag in for the rest of the episode?
Yeah, I'm sure he's totally free.
He's probably got a Discord, right?
Absolutely.
Doesn't he worship like a snake puppet god or something?
Yeah.
We're getting off track. So anyway, this series...
Which snake god do you worship?
The snake god Discord. So I'm not using a computer right now. I'm just speaking into a snake's mouth.
Zander, you're a fucking great guest.
That's amazing.
Yeah, fucking legend. You come back anytime. This really could be a 3-hour long podcast. This ran from June 24th, 2014 to February 12th, 2016, and it was 2 volumes over 13 chapters, making this one of the shortest series I think we have ever read. Jordan, have we read anything shorter than this?
Godspeed was 6 chapters.
Wow.
That was not great. Yeah.
It felt longer than 6 chapters.
Well, sorry, Lauren O'Neill, who actually actively was like, I needed to start drinking wine while I was reading this. Because it was not a good series, but she was a great guest. Enough about Lauren O'Neill and Alan Moore. Let's get into talking about the manga itself.
Here's the plot summary. Ion Hidaka and Sora Misumaru are 2 schoolgirls who attend a monster taming academy. The monsters in this world are photosynthetic and are highly responsive to the singing of young girls. Their first task on the monster taming committee is to take care of the monster out behind the high school, who Ion names Blue. And when she sings to it, she causes a biotorrent, a monster reaction that causes them to make vaguely good things happen. The 2 then meet Tsukiko, the chair of the monster committee, and Koto, her friend/maybe girlfriend, who graduated high school early and now works as a researcher because she's real smart. A little lizard dude then tags along with Tsukiko, and the next day he has grown massive and clings to the high school. He turns rock solid, which humans believe means that a monster is dead, but when Ion sings, as we mentioned before with the Deus Ex Machina that is the biotorrent, he breaks out of his shell, revealing that he has molted into a cool dragon with wings, and Tsukiko names him Happy Freedom Bird. Popcorn David.
We're then introduced to Gyoku Segusa, a world-famous monster tamer who saved Ion when she was a little girl, who shows the girls her new monster, a creepy octopus that I really wanted to get out of this fucking manga and away from these children, but I was really proud that this didn't get super weird like the Mona Lisa scene from Teenage Renaissance David, which I'm more than happy to explain, Zander, but that was probably one of the strangest, most egregious underage girl sexuality scenes we had ever seen.
It's one of those things, you read a manga, you see a young girl, you see an octopus, you just get worried. You know,
and all of your fears are justified in that scene. And the girl is a girl who is like the living embodiment of the Mona Lisa. Like the painting. Yeah. It was a series about classic art.
We can't get into Teenage Renaissance David.
You're right. I know. I did that on purpose. I wanted you to feel powerful.
Thank you, David. I know.
I'm thankful for you. And also, thankfully, a huge water bubble monster arrives and the octopus jumps into it, thankfully leaving these girls an eye for good because it is not this kind of manga. The girls travel to a monster sanctuary to try and help a monster going on a hunger strike by avoiding the sunlight. Turns out the monster saved Sora when she was little and she's able to give it back its will to live. Then, an old man thinks a monster is his son and he dies. Don't worry about it. It doesn't matter to the plot, even though I actually will agree, even though Jordan wrote this, that was definitely probably the best individual chapter of the series.
Yeah.
Popcorn, Zander.
A particularly massive monster nicknamed Pointy-sama reveals itself from underneath the school, and the students start making wishes to it. Ion starts noticing that a very young girl keeps hanging around it. Her name is Nonoka, and she is actually dying in a coma, but is somehow able to connect with Pointy-sama in an undefined way. There's an aurora, Pointy-sama shrinks down, and Nonoka wakes up, unless that part was a dream sequence. I'm still not sure. At last, there is a time skip. Sayagusa is the chief of monster research, and Ion is a new official tamer.
Awesome.
Just to dive into the characters, I'll start out with Ion. She is shy, she loves and names Blue, she sings to him. She's got some vague backstory, but I don't really feel like she really changed or grew much, which we'll get into the negatives, but I definitely think that was a flaw of the series, because I feel like the first two main characters don't have a lot of meat to them, especially compared to some of the supporting characters.
You kind of get the sense the author felt that too.
Yeah, because he's like, let me introduce kind of replacements that are much more interesting.
All these characters sort of like cut from the same cloth as every sort of young girl manga, you know?
People always say the genre cute girls doing X, and sometimes the X is like the gimmick, like girls under Panzer, which is what if cute girls ran a like World War II tank?
That I'm into. That's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Seems like I've seen every episode of that.
Yeah. I just remember like seeing some anime 20 years ago or something like that, where it's just like the cutest little fluffiest bunnies. They were like fighting a war with like super hyper realistic and accurate weaponry. The disconnect was so intense that it was like, I must see what happens, even though I I don't care really, but I'm like, I'm thrilled by it.
That's the beauty of anime, like just horrifying things happen, but everyone just looks so adorable.
It's like Madoka.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, what a great series. Let's say nothing about it and just let people watch it.
Okay. Ion, her whole thing is, so there's this big old monster named Blue. He's got a section down there, but she names him Blue, and he seems to actually like her and lets her ride on his snout, which is apparently pretty rare. What I like about it is that they really treat the monster like he's just like the school's pet.
Very good boy.
Yeah, but there isn't that much to say about Ion other than she's apparently just a really good singer.
Like a reader insert character too, where it's just like, hey, are you shy? Do you like to sing? Well, then maybe you can look at the world through her eyes.
She's just a high school girl, but she's clumsy, just like Bella.
Snoresville.
Oh God. So Jordan, though, would you like to talk a little bit about Sora? Not from Kingdom Hearts, the other one.
Oh,
the other
from
one.
Digimon. No, I'm kidding.
We've met a lot of people named Sora in this.
I think Sora's just kind of a common Japanese name.
Yeah, which is ironic because she is not the Sora, which, Zander, we have a term called Sora where a series has a very mediocre cast and there's one character that's like a C+ in a pool of fails, named after a character called Beast Children, which was probably, in terms of actual production quality, no longer, I guess, the worst now that we've read Boki-san, but probably the second worst thing from a purely critical evaluation standpoint of the quality of it being created.
Interesting.
There's a lot of competition. Anyway, Sora's is more energetic. So the thing with her is that, whereas Eon, her thing is that she is actually afraid of monsters, but she was saved from a monster by an older girl as a little kid, and it makes her actually want to become a monster tamer because she wants to be as cool as her. But Sora actually loves monsters, but she's so bad at school that she just flunked out of the monster tamer course. So she's got to join this committee club in order to get anywhere with these monsters. Beyond that, there's really not much.
Nope.
She's not that important.
Yep. Xander, would you like to talk about the next character?
Tsukiko Miyama is the chair of the Monster Tamers Committee. So yeah, like the older, what was she, sort of like the mentor of the group, kind of?
You're getting her confused with another girl. Don't feel bad. I just read this over the past couple days, and I am also confused over this. The girls kind of blend together a lot.
Oh yeah, this one was sort of the mean girl.
Yeah.
Who is, who provides the 1 ounce of sort of antagonism in this whole story.
Yes.
So it's like everything is going swimmingly for everybody at all times, except she's like, you're a jerk, or whatever. It's like, okay. But she really wants to sing these songs, but she can't, or she's bad at it, or something like that.
I think the way that the author conveys that is that when Eon sings, there's no dialogue or anything. Like, the implication is she's just kind of singing, like, notes and stuff. But Tsukiko has to put in lyrics, and they're, like, really bad. And that's how the author conveys that she is a bad singer.
Yeah. The subtitles just say bad rapping.
Let's move on to the most interesting character, Blue.
Yes. Xander, as our honored guest, would you like to say anything? And resident kaiju expert.
Yeah. I'd like to talk about the monster's design. First of all, I think I would be really mad at myself if I designed a character like this, because it's got those 3 curved horns that would be really hard to draw in perspective. You'd just be making problems for yourself. And then also, it's like the texture of him is boring. Like,
yeah.
It's like, oh, he has this defined face. That's pretty good. I mean, it's a little bit sort of standard sort of kaiju face. But, like, I find him to be kind of a boring design for a monster.
He's very bland, yeah.
He works for what he is, which is sort of like this sort of calming presence or whatever that loves this girl or lets this girl ride around on his face or whatever. And he does have those big, like, mole hands, which I appreciate that. Like, that, at least they're not sort of like your standard sort of faux Godzilla hands.
I also appreciated how he seems to fight by sumo wrestling. Like, if you notice, he does, like, sumo slaps.
Yeah.
I liked when he did that to a giant hand that was sticking out of the ground, so it was like he was just high-fiving the hand.
That's what fights ought to be like.
I agree.
That would have made it better. This was a kaiju sumo wrestle. Oh, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Oh.
Already giving spoilers on how I would have redone the series. But yeah, sorry, Jordan, continue.
I like how, just docile he is, big and lazy. He just has the temperament of, a really big old dog.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting that they sort of do the thing right away where they're like, these giant monsters photosynthesize. Like, they don't eat things. Like, right away they solve the problem that they couldn't solve in all the Clifford books, where he had to, eat a truck's worth of meat, presumably 3 times a day. You can see that they were kind of, had to think of that at the last minute, like, oh, my God, what do these things eat? Like, they're going to eat these girls if we don't, figure something out.
Yeah, because, otherwise it's like you'd have to justify, well, why is this school just allowing these girls hanging out with these bloodthirsty, carnivorous giant monsters?
Why do they keep ordering, 4,000 horses a day?
Yeah.
I mean, I can't blame them for sidestepping that issue by making them, photosynthetic.
Totally, but it just seemed like, uh-oh, it's the day where we have to write this scene, okay, roll D20. Okay, photosynthesize. Phew. All right, we did it.
You see the mechanical reason for why the writer had to do it, but also if you can identify very clearly the overall mechanical reason for that, it kind of means that the idea wasn't properly kind of meshed into it.
Right. There was never a problem of oh no, this monster's stuck in a cave, it can't get to the sun, so it can't photosynthesize. It was never a double-edged sword. It was it only just solved the problem of why aren't they eating these children?
Yeah.
Well, did have the monster who tried to kill himself by isolating himself from sunlight. That was
yes.
That was interesting.
Yes, but I think this might be a good discussion point just to talk about some flaws in the series. So why don't we finish up the characters and we can dive right into that section. And I see why we've changed that after a few months of running the show to make that the section immediately after the character section.
Yeah, exactly.
Because, Xander, when we started the show, we thought most of the series we were going to read were like hidden gems. And then we're like, no. Most of these were canceled because they were bad.
Yeah, exactly. So you want me to go on to the next character?
Yeah, go for it.
The next character is Kotomi Justine, like just straight up Justine Kagarazaka, aka Koto is how they're going to refer to her most of the time throughout the series. And her whole thing is that she's a researcher who is in a graduate program despite the fact that she's a teen, and that's it. Also, she is dating Tsukiko? That's like...
there was like a very ambiguous Yuri thing that I kind of feel like maybe he wasn't allowed to. It's like an ITLC where the main character of that manga was bisexual, but because of like restrictions, they couldn't openly make her bisexual. And I think this series just had to keep everything very ambiguous.
I think the thing that Western eyes on anime and manga, like it's very easy to assume that they have like the exact same like relationship with sexuality over there. I remember reading like this article years ago, and you know, it was like in Japan, like young girls are supposed to kind of get in little flings with each other, and it's seen as a way to practice being like with a man as an adult. And obviously there's a lot of nuance there that I am not familiar with, but basically I'm saying I don't know if this is proper, if this would be seen as progressive or not, is what I'm saying. I don't know.
Yeah.
I lived in Japan for 2 years. And,
oh, wow.
Yeah. And so, like, one of the things that I thought was really interesting is that, like, and this was 20 years ago, so things are different. But, like, our friend would be like, oh, well, you know, officially there are no gay people in Japan. Like, even in 2002 or 3.
What?
So it was like, if you have a very close relationship with, you know, somebody of the same sex, it isn't like, oh my gosh, it's a slippery slope down to, you know, to Devilsville or whatever. It isn't like it isn't like the US in that way. But it also, you know, it's like, well, if you want to marry that person, you're out of luck. But I mean, so like close relationships like that weren't sort of seen like, we have to stop this right away or else the worst possible thing in the world could happen. It was just sort of like, well, you know, that's just being a teen, or that's just being wild and crazy as a 20-something or whatever. You know what I mean?
Like, it isn't so much that they'll, like, burn you at the stake for it as much as they just won't take your relationship seriously.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, everybody does that sort of stuff, and then they straighten up and, so to speak, and get married.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a topic I cannot speak on.
It's different, not better or more progressive.
Exactly. I think that's the best way to kind of categorize it. It's a different culture with its own baggage.
Yeah.
And then, sorry, I just don't know how to transition.
Anyway, the last character is Kyoko Saigusa.
Let me handle this one. She is the last monster tamer. She's good with monsters, doesn't really like her title. She's also losing her voice, so she slowly will physically been incapable of singing. And I like how their doctor was like, yeah, if you keep singing, your voice is gonna get all fucked up, and that's your problem.
I like how they didn't bring up that she couldn't sing until literally the second before she sang.
Well, that's how you knew how desperate she had to be to sing.
Yeah.
I know that as a writer, you're like, oh, yeah, there was a thing I was supposed to set up like 3 chapters ago, and I just didn't. Oops. Guess we're doing it as we lead into the scene where it matters.
It's like if Superman, like, is about to fight someone's like, oh, I forgot to mention, if they have this thing called kryptonite, I'm super weak to it, and the guy just brings out kryptonite. You're like, oh, no, how did he have kryptonite? Wow.
Oh, man.
The series. All right, she was also a student teacher. I don't know what else to say about her. How about you guys?
She's the one who saved Eon when Eon was a little kid. She has blonde hair, I think.
Yeah.
Her hair is not colored in, which is relevant because Koto's hair is also not colored in. And they're also both, like, hanging out there while not actually being students. And I kept getting them so confused.
Thank God. I was so fucking confused. Yeah. I legitimately could not tell who was who during a lot of the scenes in this series.
I couldn't either, and I stopped worrying about it.
You're a professional at this. Are you guys sure you like the series?
There are aspects of the series that I like.
All right, fine. But why don't we talk about that after we get into the negatives? we are getting into the bread and butter of the show, kind of sadly, is why it failed. This series has, like, no character growth whatsoever, no explanation of the world in a very satisfying way. Like, it's weird to be like, I wish there was more exposition, because that's usually the issue with a lot of series, but my god, they had so many concepts that just were not explained or explained very poorly that it was hard for me to really care.
This is less of a monster manga and more of a girls in high school manga. And I don't have, like, that much experience with it, but, like, the few that I have watched, such as, like, Azumanga Daioh or Lucky Star, like, you gotta be funnier, is what I'm basically saying. You gotta be, like, funnier than this. It just felt kind of scattered, and it didn't really do it enough, I suppose.
I've never had so little happen in 300 pages.
Oh, wait until you read Bokusan.
Oh, don't read Bokusan. I have a better idea, yeah.
I mean, if the idea is I'm taking this very well-worn concept of girls in high school and adding this thing, which is probably what got it sold. It's like, oh yeah, that plus kaiju, some editor somewhere was like, yeah, okay. But like, there's no mismatch. We're like, oh yeah, I can sing to them and it works. But it's like, well, the monsters never did any of the stuff that monsters do that maybe a girl will go be like, oh my god, I can't believe you ate the shed or whatever.
That touches on, like, something that I think is kind of at the core of this series, which is that these aren't monsters. Like, these aren't really monsters, These are, like...
Right, giraffes.
They are treated in the same way that you would treat, like, a strange animal or something. They're a lot more like Pokemon, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's also their designs were super bland. Like, they're not monsters except for their size.
This is the generic idea of a monster. Like, yeah, there's like a big monkey guy, I don't know. There's like some lizard over there. Yeah, that's pretty cool. He turns into Charizard. That's dope. And then, like, I don't know, over here, there's a weird octopus thing. The weird bubble thing does not fit into any of this.
They even lampshade. They're like, this doesn't seem to play by normal rules of how monsters work in this series.
Yeah. The term monster is just so generic. And also... they make a big deal out of how the monsters turn into rocks, and we don't know what it means when that happens, and it doesn't matter.
They even say sometimes they'll also go into rocks to have kids, which is never shown. The series, again, very badly explains its world and then doesn't even follow its own rules.
You didn't need to introduce the rock stuff. I don't really know why you did. You didn't explain it. You didn't go anywhere with it, and it's kind of just dragging you down at this point.
I mean, I think about, like, when you're a writer and you're sort of like, okay, I'm introducing the concept. I'm putting all the chess pieces on the board, so to speak. And then I think you always end up dropping the ball on a couple of them or like saying, oh, this didn't work as well as I thought in practice. But like, there's so little happening that you feel like, yeah, like they should follow their own rules so that at least mysteries get solved and you can kind of go, oh, yeah, that's why that happened. Because I feel like if it was a little bit wackier or that there was, more humorous or more action packed or more sort of like frantic in some other way, I think that you could kind of sort of get it by people that the lore doesn't make total sense.
Zander, are you familiar with JoJo's Bizarre Adventure at all?
I was about to talk about Part 8 with the rock people.
I know what it is, but I haven't watched it or read it.
The thing about JoJo, and the thing that the writer Araki does that I love, is that he will do that. Like, he will introduce something at the beginning and then just completely never address it again. But there's so much shit that is constantly happening, and it's so insane and wild that you don't really care.
There are certain types of stories where the plot really matters. If you're like, oh, we're going to do a heist or whatever, well, then the plot really matters because you don't want to just sort of say like, well, and then we just randomly did this thing. But if it's a satire and like it's taking place over many, many days and it's just sort of like a workplace drama, you can have plot holes the size of trucks and people won't really care. It's all about the characters. I mean, I think that they could have gotten away with that very easily because it's like, I never once looked at these monsters and be like, oh man, I really hope we find out how they work. It's like, they clearly don't know how they work. Who cares?
Yeah.
I just wanted there to be more funny stuff or more sort of adventures or something.
It's really just the fact that they could have used those pages where they were talking about the rocks to do that more funny stuff and things like that,
Yeah, I mean, I kept thinking about things like Yokai Watch or whatever, where like weird things are like messing up his daily life, you know? And I think that was really kind of fun that you can have these things where it's like, oh yeah, here's a yokai, which is like an actual, like, or, you know, it's very much like a real sort of mystical, you know, something from Japanese folklore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here's how it would fit into, you know, a 6th grade classroom or whatever, you know? And I think that sort of stuff is great. But it's like the school and the monster training seem to be completely separate. And it was really, the school was just a place where they could go and be like, I don't know, learn more about it or whatever. But it didn't have anything to do with it, really.
It was just an excuse to have the characters meet up with each other every day because there wasn't an organic reason.
Yeah.
I think the last thing is also the art. We talked about the character design is not very good, especially for both the characters and the kaiju, but also the art is just very, Xander, maybe you know a better expression, but there was a lack of like energy in the art. There was very little squash and stretch. There's very little movement lines. And it just kind of looked like you were looking at a screenshot of like a movie rather than it being a comic book where things were active, where motion is actively being shown in each panel. Yeah.
I think that you can really lean into that kind of style. You know, if you're doing something that's very sort of like calm and like comforting and sort of yashike type of manga or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But like the thing that really bothered me, and this is the case in a lot of manga, is that they would repeat layouts so frequently, where it's just like, here's a character, small, next to a monster, big, and that is the frame. And then it's like 2 pages later, they have almost exactly the same shot with maybe a different character. Maybe not. Maybe it's like in the same scene and it's the same character, and they just didn't have a more interesting way to frame the thing because the storytelling is so decompressed, you know, that they'll go page after page after page with the same sort of physical setup for every scene, for that scene. And that was the thing that bothered me. Like, I don't really mind sort of the sparseness of the art, but I thought it was kind of boring that it's like we've sort of mined this scene visually as much as we possibly can. We need to get out of here instead of just repeating things.
You know, it's funny. I think that was bothering me that I didn't even occur to me, but I do think you're right. Like, overall composition of the panels was pretty boring and samey.
I mean, it's all very competent. There's not a single, like, bad panel, you know, that's like, oh, they really screwed it up. It's just that they have competent panel after competent panel, and it never thrills you at all, you know?
Yeah, I would agree.
You should definitely read Look Back, which is like the absolute mastery of manga paneling.
It's very good, yes.
Okay.
Speaking of things that are really great, though, why don't we shift gears into what it did well? I'm waiting for you to judge my transitions as a professional, so you'll have to let me know what you think at the end of the show. You can give me a rating out of 10 on my transition scale. You're like, David, don't quit your day job.
Your day job on Shonen Flop, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, God, I've lost a lot of money making this podcast, as Jordan knows.
Oh, yes, it's true.
But speaking of Jordan, tell us, what were the things you liked about this series?
It was just very sweet in many places, you know, like there was this heartwarming aspect to it that I really appreciated. I really loved how, even though they're not like really monsters, it's really more just about taking care of animals. Like, I view this as being like if the school just had a horse and, oh, these 2 girls are on the horse cleaning committee and they have to take care of it. And the fact that it's a monster kind of just makes things a little bit funnier to me. Like, Of course, they have the big old, like, hamster water dispenser. That's hilarious. I also thought that there were, like, some really funny, like, little moments. I really liked how, like, one of the running gags is that each of the monsters has, like, different names because each girl wants the monster to use the name they came up with, but a lot of the names are just terrible.
Blue in a black and white manga because it has blue eyes that you can't tell only because they told you that.
Exactly.
To talk about Build King, Jordan.
Yeah.
This black and white comic had their entire power system named after colors. And they have literally a black and white color chart where they have to say, this grayscale is blue, this grayscale is green, this grayscale is purple. And yes, it's as terrible as you think it would be. So yeah, Jordan, did you have anything else negatives that you wanted to talk about?
You mean the positives?
Oh, sorry, positives. Yeah, I'm sorry. I can't associate positivity when talking about Build King, so I'm just...
I totally get it.
Yeah, so any other positives?
There was this one little, like, bottle episode that I thought was actually surprisingly well done. Backing up a little bit, their city was like destroyed by this one monster. I forget how many years ago, but it happened in 1999. I just forget which year this takes place in. And one of the things there is this defense secretary authorized like a huge assault on the monster and seemingly destroyed it. And there were a lot of casualties. And the old man, now he's old, he wakes up and the monster is there, but the monster, he believes that the monster is his son, and you find out that his son actually died in that attack. And I got the implication that the son might have been killed in the attack on the monster, so maybe the old man blames himself for his son's death. It was actually like surprisingly heartwarming and just came out of nowhere and then doesn't matter.
Yeah, this offer for the first 7 chapters really dirtled, and then chapter 8 he tries for a little bit, and then he realizes he got canceled and he stopped trying again.
Yeah, there was that big massive monster called Pointy Sama, where girls can make wishes to it. Yeah, there was that little girl. I still don't understand what the hell was going on with her. She was in a coma, and then she might have died or might have come back, but it seemed like it might have been a dream sequence. Fucking whatever. Yeah, the series gets very confusing towards the end and just completely loses the plot threads.
I mean, all their best moments didn't even really involve the main characters. It was almost like this anthology book of sad monster stories.
It did feel like kind of an anthology. Mm-hmm. This would have been better if there were just why don't we actually move on to the section where we're supposed to talk about that shit?
Okay, you mean where it could have gone?
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Just to make sure though, Zander, was there anything else positive you wanted to say about the series?
The slowness of it, I think, was generally a negative, but it had a sort of dreamlike quality to it that I could appreciate.
The way it did that idea was kind of bland, but it is kind of fun, this whole, what if it was cute girls doing cute things involving monster, like kaijus? And so I think that was a novel idea, even if I didn't really like the execution.
I would agree with that. And I also want to say I might have had a more positive reaction to this because it came off of us reading Bokusan. And this is just the complete opposite of Bokusan, where so much happens, none of it matters. It's things happening all the fucking time. You can't follow a single goddamn thing. It's moving so fast. You can't keep track. At least this was just okay, yeah, just hanging out. There's some girls. They're just hanging out. They got a big old monster and it's cute.
Oh, yeah. Speaking of, where could it gone? Anyway, I couldn't fit. We had a good transition. I'm sorry we had to wrangle it back because I want to make sure our guest had a chance to talk about Jordan.
Oh, yeah. Okay, fine. I see. Yeah.
I'm just kidding. I love you, buddy. I'm just hangry because my oven broke on my cooking day. So I literally had all the ingredients in my oven and turn on. My super's like, yeah, I'll come by tomorrow. I'm like, fuck. And there was the New York Marathon. So guess where I couldn't go and get anything. So I had to figure out what the hell I could eat in my fridge today.
Oh no, David. Did you eat?
I ate more popcorn than I think I probably should have, but we'll just not tell the dietitian about that.
Yeah, I won't.
So anyway, though, in terms of things where I think they could have gone differently, let's go into where it could have gone. Zander, as definitely the expert in this area of wholesale just creating comics, where do you think, if you could have really dictated the series, what would you have done differently?
I can't say that I wouldn't have done the same photosynthesis thing, so you wouldn't have to worry about the amount of food that kaiju would have to eat or that sort of stuff. But it would have been sillier. I would have sort of created the characters based around how they react to sort of stress and adversity. You know, one of them freaks out, one of them gets really quiet and and works it out, or that kind of stuff. So that then you could have oh, here's a wacky thing that a monster is climbing in the window. They all react in different ways, or somebody has to keep a secret that there's a kaiju baby or blah, blah, that kind of stuff. There would be a lot more adventures and running around and being silly. The other thing is that you'd want to sort of play into all the sort of kaiju archetypes and tropes. And I mean, the way that I did with Kaiju Max, what happens if an Ultraman type character comes to town and wants to kill your monster that's your pet at the school? Well, then what do you have to do? You can't fight him and have them react to that. And I think that you could still do that sort of peaceful, the camaraderie or whatever, have the action be a little bit more satirical.
Yeah.
I think the kaiju themselves were kind of a marketing ploy, and really what they wanted these girls to do was hang out with, giraffes or whatever, big peaceful animals,
Eating some motherfucking leaves.
Do you think this series would have been better if it was just animals?
maybe.
There is a giraffe behind the school for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, a giraffe would be like weird enough. Like that, oh wow, there's a giraffe behind the school. But then you wouldn't expect them to be like breathing fire or like smashing buildings or like have done that stuff in the past or whatever.
Yeah. One thing that happens a lot in manga that, like, did not happen here, and which could have happened in that situation, is they could have had, like, a bunch of moments where they were like, oh, hey, it's a giraffe. Well, did you know this is what a giraffe eats? See, like, this is this is an interesting thing about giraffes. This is how you got to take care of them and stuff. And you can't really do that with a monster because they don't exist, and also their eating habits, on one hand, yeah, it's a hand wave that gets you away from having to worry about them eating the girls, but on the flip side, then you get rid of anything interesting about what they eat.
There's no mechanic that involves, like, this is something we have to do.
Yeah.
But it was always just like, I have to sing to calm down this already calm monster.
Yeah, it's like, oh, we gotta have dedicated dog pacifiers. You know, those animals are known for just being so hard to work with.
Exactly. These monsters just seem so non-threatening. I've mentioned it before, they just really do not feel like monsters. Like, the weirdest thing about the photosynthesis is it implies that, like, all the monsters are the same species, and, like, they're not. Like, I'm looking at them. Clearly, they're different. Like, are you telling me that this octopus is photosynthetic? Why? That doesn't make sense.
I thought we weren't going to talk about the octopus, Jordan.
Oh, God, you're right. Oh!
Yeah, we didn't even talk about in the flaws of the series kind of awkwardly makes all of these girls, like, have giant boobs for some reason, despite being, like, 14.
They're hardly the only ones who have done that.
It's really a question what series don't do that at this point.
The answer is Candy Flurry. Anyway.
But yeah, and then though, my big where it could have gone is, I think, and it was hard for me not to bring it up earlier, was I think it really would have helped if it was in the 4-koma format. Like, if it just knew it was a gag manga, and so, you know, like you said, Azumayo Daioh, which has that comic format.
I've heard that 4-koma was giving people, like, heart attacks and stuff, so that's why they banned it.
Shut up, Jordan. I hate you so much. Zander, would you like to be my co-host moving forward?
Absolutely.
Well, bye, everybody.
Bye. No. And also, just don't introduce any new characters for the first, like, 2 or 3 chapters. Just make the world, explain the rules, and don't introduce a bunch of characters where it's literally like you didn't like your initial 2 protagonists and you tried to replace them and then tried to replace them again with characters that looked like the secondary replacement. Jordan, in One Piece, Zoro doesn't show up until the end of the 3rd chapter.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. When you introduce characters in one chapter and then introduce more characters, it really just feels more like you really should have just introduced them all in the 1st chapter.
Right.
It really just feels like you were going to and then ran out of room. It didn't feel like a calculated thing that you did for the benefit of the story, so much as like, oh shit, I have more characters and I forgot to do anything with them. Damn.
Every character that they introduced seemed like a main character. Like, they could be the main character of the story. It wasn't like, oh, you know, here's our main character, a schoolgirl, and then here's the teacher, you know, there's this teacher and that teacher and the stern principal and the friendly, you know, janitor and like the you know, and then these monsters. It was like they were all their own character rather than the one character, and they have the relationship with every other character that you meet.
Yeah. By the way, and I know that this is like, we're talking about the negatives in a different section, but whatever. The ages of these characters were so confusing. A certain number of girls are like in high school or middle school, I guess, and then like the teacher looks like she's the same age as the other students, but she's actually a teacher. But then there's a time skip when she was a student and another main character is a middle schooler at that point. It's just kind of hard to see how these girls relate to each other age-wise, especially because, I mean, in manga, like, it's not like you can tell how old somebody is from how they're drawn.
Yeah, it's like in One Piece where Oda drew Robin, like this 30-year-old woman, and how she'd look if she was 50 or 70, and it's literally she looks exactly the same in both drawings. Oh, man. By the way, we are getting a little tight on time, so does anyone have anything pertinent they really want to talk about, or are you guys cool if we migrate to the miscellaneous thoughts?
Let's go.
So, Zander, what would you say is really a miscellaneous thought that you just didn't really have an opportunity to say before on this recording?
My miscellaneous thought about all like media that I'm asked to sort of like give my thoughts on is like, man, I know how hard it is to make stuff. Just getting anything done is hard, and deadlines are terrible. You know, every comic book artist that you've ever seen is like twice as good as you think they are, because they're always on a deadline. They're always under the gun. They're always sort of like, you know, sort of having to take these shortcuts or like drawing things from a weird angle that they haven't tried before or whatever. And so, yeah, I'm always inclined to give things a little grace. I mean, even if it is boring, and even if it is, you know, or it isn't sort of like aimed at me, which I don't think it particularly is aimed at me. You know, I'm a little old for this kind of this genre, right? I always have this appreciation of people who are like, yeah, I mean, let's get out there and do this, especially if they're doing it for earnest reasons. Like, oh, I really like Schoolgirls and I really like Monsters. It's like, man, then you go. Like, if you're doing it for cynical reasons, I'm a little bit less inclined to give people a break, but like, there's a good-heartedness to it that I can kind of appreciate here. I don't know that they had the premise like rock solid, but you could tell that they had a worldview that they wanted to express, and I think they expressed it pretty well.
Yeah. And I will say, if somebody comes up to me and says that they really like Schoolgirls, I will tell that person to never talk to me again.
Ha!
No, I do agree. And Zander, I also have to ask, are you familiar with like the specific brutal crunch that like Shonen Jump authors and artists are under?
Only from reading Bakuman.
Though I will say though, Jordan, this wasn't a Shonen Jump series, and I think it was monthly.
I'm sure it was still, like, very stressful for him. Even just having a month to put out a series, to put out a chapter is itself tough enough.
I work with one other person on Kaiju Max, and it's like, I was able to do some of them in 5 weeks, but it really started being more like 6, 7, 8 weeks for 22 pages. I mean, that, you know, and that's color, but it's like, these are toned. I mean, that's a lot of work too.
Yeah.
And that really starts to weigh you down too after 7, 8, 9 months of like being under the gun.
Like, there are straight up manga artists that just cannot draw anymore.
Like, the guy who made Naruto, he just straight up, his next series, he couldn't do the art for it.
Wow. Because he had damaged his nerves or something like that, or his wrist?
His art style changed, and pretty much people think, like, the last, like, few years of Naruto, he just had a ghost artist, because he just physically could not draw, and the art just really did not look like the style at the beginning of the series.
Happens to everybody. Like, I think is probably the best thing that ever happened in terms of like digital art. I think digital art has saved more people's careers than anything else in the history of comics, you know, because it's like, your wrist is hurting. Yeah, well, draw big, you know, like the screens are big now, like draw big. I personally know like half a dozen people that it's like, it extended their career by 20 years plus.
That's awesome.
Zander, thanks so much, though, for that really cool perspective on just being an artist. Let's finally start getting near the end with our final verdict. Why don't I start by just reading some of the fan 6-word summaries, including one that someone sent us while we were recording from Luke. So very timely. I'm glad I built that telepathic connection with him.
You did it.
The first one comes from Adam, who says, how to train your nuclear metaphor.
Nice.
Next one is from T. Wolfwood, who says, cute girls befriending monsters, love it. Next one is from Luke, boner killing levels of boring manga, question mark. And finally from Tucker, monsters stole these girls' distinguishing features.
Damn.
Dude, Tucker's a fucking like legend at writing these 6-word summaries. I swear to God, he's so good at them.
Oh my God, Tucker. Hell yeah. So mine is, the horse girls have found Godzilla.
Fuck, mine's so much worse than that. Xander, what's yours?
Oh yeah, just very calm girls and very calm monsters.
Yeah.
I had to, because I wrote the first one based on the first chapter before the series kind of changed, but mine was monster, blossom, as a reference to the Badger song. When I thought that plot element would matter more to the series.
Nope.
And then mine is, I was trying to make it like a monster pun, but this just sounds really generic. So I had to set up where I said Rex cute idea with bad execution.
I mean, it's accurate, yeah.
Kaiju's like break, destroy things.
Oh, there we go.
I got you.
Okay.
And you already had Blossom. You could have put in Buttercup and Bubbles. So, yeah, anyway.
There was Bubbles, actually.
There were Bubbles. Just need Buttercups next.
There was a Bubble monster.
Yeah.
Oh, God, I failed in front of Senpai. Jordan, speaking of failures, what was your thought on this series?
Yeah, this was a flop. I mean, I didn't hate reading it. I got enjoyment out of reading it. There were some moments that just made me, like, feel pretty happy. Mm-hmm. It had a lot of flaws, and I probably won't think about it that much after we finish this episode, to be honest.
Yep. How about you, Xander?
If it were in an anthology like Shonen Jump or whatever, I'd probably read it every time it showed up. Like, it's not hard to read. It's very pleasant to read.
Mm-hmm.
But I never would be like, I must find out what's happening in Monster Tamer Girls. It's not compelling. It doesn't grip you, but it's fine.
This is like in Shonen Jump, there's a story called Mission Family, which is by far the most he writes it week by week series, but he's trying to make like a spy novel, so it like really doesn't make sense a lot of the time. So he just tries to make things so complicated that he's like, you just don't get it. And I'm like, no, you just clearly didn't plan any of the spy novel shit at a time. And I'm pretty sure I've never seen anyone talk about it, and I think it just hasn't been canceled because they just forget it runs in Shonen Jump.
And they're just like, we write a check to somebody every week. I don't know who it is.
I didn't even know this existed until you brought it up.
So anyway, though, mine is, of course, a flop. Based on this conversation, I thought you guys did like it, so I was worried. And so, Jordan, though, since we all did flops, we can all go around and give some recommendations. So, Zander, no worries if you weren't prepared for this part, but essentially just while Jordan's talking, if you want to think about just something that instead of checking this out, that they should check out instead. If you want to do the 500 IQ move patented by Laura O'Neill, she said check out my work instead. So I won't blame you if that's what you go with, but just be aware that someone has already done.
Well, too fucking bad, because I'm already gonna do it, everybody. You should read Kaiju Max instead. In the same way where, like, in Kaiju Max, you're not, like, really talking about kaiju, you're talking about mass incarceration and things like that.
What? I am?
Well, that's just my theory, I went to art school, I dig into things a little bit too much,
Hold the phone. Are you, like, mansplaining to the author about what his own work means?
Damn, I am!
This is advanced level Jordan-splaining.
Oh, God, yeah, seriously. But, like, no, in the same way that happened, like, this is very much, like, it's not really about raising kaiju. It's about, like, raising animals and stuff and getting over your fears with yourself and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's great. So, Xander, I guess now you can't recommend your own work.
Okay.
What Alan Moore work since Jordan... No, I'm just kidding.
I haven't read a lot of comics lately, but there's a comic called Giant Days.
Ooh!
And also Wicked Things.
That was actually part of our book club as well. I just finished reading Wicked Things, so I just perked up and I was like,
oh yeah,
I see how you and Luke are friends.
John Allison is a friend of mine. I've never met Max Sarin.
Really?
But Max Sarin is one of the best artists working today. I mean, just everything that they do is just so beautifully sort of rendered. It's animated like it seems very sort of fluid. And I mean, all those Giant Days issues and Wicked Things was just so good. Like really plot heavy, which I thought was really great. An interesting change from Giant Days, which was so character based.
Giant Days was just like a delight to read.
I read all his stuff while I was like on a flight to Europe over like 8 hours.
Oh, wow.
He's actually on like our short list of, we have like our super long backlog of guests, but he's like on the top of people we want to reach out to be a guest on the show. Because he seems like such an awesome dude.
Max or John Allison? Sorry, I didn't catch that.
John Allison.
I have a drawing that he did of Godzilla up in my studio, yeah.
Dude, that's sick.
I would love to see a picture of it if at all possible. That would be awesome.
If I go to the studio tomorrow, I'll take a picture of it.
In return, I can send you a picture of the time I made cookies that looked like my manager's face for his birthday.
They made him look like white Obama, apparently.
Yeah,
it's
they did. They reused an
thing.
Obama stencil.
Wow.
So anyway, my recommendation, I wrote down two, but actually during the recording, I realized a much better one. So for context, I realized because I kind of half recommended Girls Last Tour, which is pretty good. So if you want something that's like a sweet series, but kind of has like a depressing backdrop. And then I also was like, oh, you could do Kaiju number 8. I don't know if you're familiar with that series, Andrew. It's kind of like Pacific Rim as a manga, but this dude fuses with a kaiju and he gains like kaiju powers and he can transform into a kaiju to fight them.
Sounds good so far.
And the series I realized, though, is actually another series I found out about from Luke called Magu-chan. So Magu-chan is about cute girls hanging out with their buddies who are all the depowered eldritch gods. So it's called Magu-pan of Destruction, where it's about an eldritch god who also has powers, and he learns how to make friends from a teenage girl.
That sounds really fun. And it's like you can imagine it being drawn in like 5 different ways, and it'd be a different story each time.
Yeah. So he has like a friendship book and he thinks it's like a demonic pact that someone makes with him. And they're like, you are now my minion after you sign like your name in this book that's like my first friendship book or something that's like for like 6-year-olds. The God of Madness just realizes he really enjoys cooking and it's like his dream now to open a restaurant. And he just makes pudding all the time because that's like the only thing he knows how to make right now.
It's a delightful series.
It sounds awesome.
So, Jordan, though, is this the worst series we have ever read?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
Build King, man. Build King's so fucking bad. Oh, God. I don't know if I mentioned that to you, Xander, that there's this series called Build King. That's really
What?
bad.
No, it's the first time hearing of it.
So let's go to Shoutouts, where we'll tell you about some other things that are worth checking out. And, of course, Xander, we want to hear all about what is going on in your world. I guess you could say your canon, if you will.
I see what you did there.
Oh, come on. That was, that's the best you could do, that joke. Props to Jordan for making the opening and ending theme, being a great co-host, and helping with the editing. Props to Shannon for the awesome cover art. You can find her online at illuminyatea, and Nigel for being our generous art benefactor. As a somber note, this is going to be her last piece. Thank you so much, Shannon, for everything you've been doing. We could not have had a better cover artist, and we are super duper excited for a brand new artist. We had almost 40 people sending us their portfolios. It took me like 3 hours to go through everything, so we really appreciate everyone that reached out, and we look forward to hopefully having more projects, because there was just so much talent. It was incredibly difficult to pick just one artist for the series moving forward.
Shannon, I'm gonna miss you, though. You're so good. You're so good.
Thanks, Tucker, for assistance with pronunciation, translation, other miscellaneous research. Thank you, Nicole, for helping with social media, being our awesome TikTok master.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much, David, for editing. Do a great fucking job, along with other stuff.
Oh, well, thank you, man. I couldn't do this show without you. Also, be sure to join the Shonen Flop Discord. Come hang out with us and talk about anime, games, or whatever else is on your mind. We also have a book club and do regular movie nights. You can find a link to it in the show notes. We actually have a movie night that's next Saturday, so unfortunately, unless you have a time machine, you'll miss it, but we are going to be seeing planes, trains, and automobiles. But It's not too late to get in the Discord for December, where you can suggest your series. I personally am going to suggest Dread 3D, because I remember that movie being super fucking awesome. So I'm looking forward to an opportunity to get to watch that. And if you've been enjoying this podcast and want to help us keep going, consider subscribing to our Patreon. We have a ton of awesome perks, ranging from exclusive mini episodes, deleted scenes, and you can even help us pick what series we're going to cover next. Find it at patreon.com/shonenflop. I also want to give a shout out to Pterodactyl Ghost for being a Chainsaw Man level patron, Gabe, Mark, Marty, and T. Wolfwood for being King of the Forest. If you're not ready for a regular commitment, consider buying some merch. We have a ton of awesome designs, including the much requested Gomez Moon and Mashal punching Harry Potter shirts, along with the cover art from this episode, and a portion of the proceeds go back to the original artist. No worries if you can't help the show out financially. If you could like, rate, review, or share, it really helps us build our audience. Even telling one friend to check us out means a lot. You can find us on Twitter at ShonenFlopcast and our website, shonenflop.com. We're on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, or wherever else you get your podcast. But above all, Mr. Zander Cannon, thank you so much for being on the show.
Hell
this was
yeah.
by far one of my favorite episodes ever to record. And I said before, this would have gone 3 hours if I didn't have to stay up, drink the midnight oil editing it. But please tell the audience, though, about what's been going on in your world.
I mean, the second to last issue of my 6-year comic series called Kaiju Max, about a prison for giant monsters, and every day I'm going like, oh, wait a second, this is the last time I'm ever going to draw this character. So that's a pretty interesting place to be, to sort of be finishing up a big, long project like that. And as for what's next, I actually don't know. So there's about 4 or 5 things that might happen. Who knows?
May I suggest a prequel called Kaiju Min?
Nice.
If you disconnected from the call, I would have been fine with that.
I am going to do a Kaiju Min, because I was going to do all the monsters that are little, like,
yes.
It's like the, like the Muppets Babies kind of thing?
Yes, it's going to be just like the Muppet Babies.
Are you now tempted to give Blue a cameo?
He'd be easy to draw.
He's very easy to draw.
I mean, there's no details.
Can you imagine such a deep cut? Or like, if you look in this corner on page 18, it's the monster from little-known series Monster Girls.
Oh man, yeah. Thank you so much, by the way, for coming on here. I've since the beginning, what I've really wanted is to have someone on the show who like really understands comic book creation and the process that goes into it. And this has been great. So thank you so much.
Oh yeah, thanks so much for having me. It really is fun, and I mean, it's fun to sort of do a deep dive into a comic, even if it's not like a comic I would normally have read, or even heard of, really. And so. Yeah. It's kind of fun to go like, yeah, I see you out there like cranking these out every month. That's hard.
Yeah, it's hard, man. And then just some regular shout outs. I want to give a shout out to AnimeShin. It's a podcast about 2 buddies talking about anime. One a longtime fan, the other one brand new to it. They have some really awesome edited YouTube vids, and you can find them at linktr.ee/AnimeShin.
And that is, by the way, anime SHIN.
Yes, like the thing above your knee or
Yes,
below your knee.
yes, exactly.
Yes, I failed out of medical school, you can tell. And then the other one I give is shout out to is The Last Comic Shop, weekly comic book reviews and recommendations on all major podcasting services. I'll have to see if they've reviewed any of your work, Xander. I'm sure nothing but positive notes before I plug this show.
Absolutely.
Should have checked that out. Oh, man. And you can find it at lastcomicshoppodcast.com. And then I'm just going to run some promos here.
Do you want a limited length Fallout audio drama to listen to? Check out Fallout Columbus, a 6-episode RPG set in the Fallout universe in the city of Columbus, Ohio. Explore a region that avoided the bombs and the system that started as a result of that. You can find us at establishedpropertyplayhouse.com or ESTPRO Playhouse on Twitter. And remember, war never changes.
Looking for a podcast all about nerddom?
Want a podcast with an emphasis on representation?
The Nerd Alternative is the podcast for you. Join me, Ram,
Me, Hassan.
And me, Levi.
3 black British nerds tackling the pop culture we love and sharing why we love them. The Nerd Alternative, a sweet melting pot of all things nerdy.
Thank you so much for joining us. This has been David.
This has been Jordan.
This has been Zander.
And you've been listening to Shonen Flop.
Keep on flopping, floppers.
Yeah.
Yeah!